Hello, I'm Jeremy Johnson, President and CEO of the Historical Society of Palm Beach County, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual presentation of More Than a Game, Champions in the Midst of Desegregation. While we wish we could all be together in person tonight, I'm delighted that you're all with us here virtually. And it is my pleasure to thank and acknowledge our panelists, our sponsors, and the host committee. I hope you enjoy this presentation.
Coach Floyd Andrews led the Maroon Devils, an exceptional basketball team, to the first state title during integrated play. In Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court had ordered the desegregation of all schools, but officials were not ready to make what would be a monumental change. The all-black schools operated with inferior facilities and secondhand materials, often damaged when white schools received their new ones.
Our teachers really felt like we could do the best with what we had, and they made that an emphasis in terms of being better. And that was a goal that was very important. But we realized we didn't have what the equivalent was with the white schools, but that didn't hold us back in terms of academics, and that goes beyond sports.
Roosevelt was the center of a community that had high standards and high hopes for its children. Racism was not allowed to be an excuse.
It was typical for them to say, you're gonna have to be 10 times better than your counterparts, so it was very important. They pushed us, not just in sports, but academically. And it was never a thing about being inferior and not having enough equipment or supplies to make that an excuse. So they were very keen on emulating the white society because they wanted us to be able to go into that with our education, and they provided us the opportunity to do it.
But the 1967-68 basketball season at Roosevelt was a high moment for West Palm Beach, for the school, and for neighboring black communities. Coach Floyd Andrews led the Maroon Devils to the first state title during integrated play.
I was a JV coach for 3 years. I became head coach for varsity.
Coach Andrews instilled lessons that the players would take into their adult lives. They did not compete with one another. They assisted one another as a team to fulfill their mission to win.
Winning was more important than the individual stats for us. Willing to share the ball and let folks play their role, and that was one of the things that helped along the way. At a practice, he would bring in rhythm and blues music, and I think, is this his way of trying to relieve the pressure or make it more fun in practice? Because you don't bring music into basketball practice, but that was a different strategy that I'm assuming he used to loosen us up and not think about it.
When the Devils reached the district tournament, Florida integrated the High School Sports Association, so Roosevelt played integrated ball for the very first time.
During that season too, when we started playing integrated ball, we went to the district tournament, 14A tournament in Jupiter. So 3 games we scored 100 points each night to win the championship. And I'm assuming they didn't expect anyone to score in triple digits. When we got to the point in the fourth quarter, in the 90s or high 80s, they would have this chant, break the clock, which meant go over that.
You don't have to be a basketball fan to be impressed with this achievement. Roosevelt was undefeated throughout the regular season, the district tournament, the regional tournament, and the state championship.
Everybody was anticipating that Roosevelt would have a terrific team. I don't think anybody expected them to be 27-0. I can remember going to an awards assembly. Ricardo Weasley himself, the point guard, the captain, he said, we expected to be 26-1. They played some pretty good teams. They might lose one of those games, but they didn't.
When they returned home with the state title, the Maroon Devils were celebrated in a big way by the city of West Palm Beach.
You had the parade around the city, covered in the Palm Beach Post as well.
8 days later, on April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
There started to be upheavals all over the country. Things were happening, towns were burning, and here there started to be some rioting and some unrest and things happening here in this area, but they were comparatively calm to what was happening overall and over the country. I thought at that time, I think people came more or less together. And I sort of attributed that closeness of coming together was more or less some of the things that had been accomplished with the team of 1968.
In 1970, Roosevelt closed in the path to integrated schools, but this season is worth remembering.
Greetings, everyone. I'm very excited about this very special program, which will recognize one of the greatest teams in Palm Beach County sports history. And on behalf of the Palm Beach County Sports Commission, we are proud to present this exhibit and panel discussion called More Than a Game, Champions in the Midst of Desegregation. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Nick Puglisi, who is the sports editor for the Palm Beach Post and Gannett Florida Sports.
Good evening, and welcome to a very special sports forum that we're having with some very special people. We're going to look back at a 1968 state championship basketball team that set all kind of records and that's still remembered today. We want to review, we want to reflect, maybe even reveal some things you've never heard before about this team. After all, there are two sports writers on this esteemed panel. And that's what I'm going to introduce right now, who the people are with me up here. My name is Nick Puglisi. I'm the sports editor of the Palm Beach Post, and I'm just a minor character in this. These guys are the real stars. I want to start, first of all, on my right here with Calvin Patterson, who actually was a member of the '63 Roosevelt basketball team.
Yes,
and so even though you were on that team, you are a legend in your own in your own right at Roosevelt High School. So I want to welcome you and glad you're part of this forum.
Thank you.
Sitting to my right is one of the true legends, Chuck Otterson, a former Palm Beach Post sports writer who covered that team back in the day. And we welcome Chuck.
Oh, thank you, Nick. It's always a pleasure to be a member of a sports panel. Makes me feel like Howie Long. And I always look around to see if Terry Bradshaw is sitting next to me. But instead, I got Calvin Patterson.
Calvin will have to do. Now, to my left is another true legend, Coach Floyd Andrews. He was the head coach of that team at Roosevelt that year. And welcome, Coach. Glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, Nick.
And
Good to be here.
It's good. And to his left is one of the stars of that team. He's a senior point guard. He's Ricardo. Rick Easley. I call you Rick, but and I've gotten to know Rick. And real quick story here. Rick is one of the reasons why this whole thing kind of got going. And a couple years back, when I became sports editor of the Post, I kept getting phone calls and messages from this guy Rick Easley bothering me about the 1968 Roosevelt basketball team. And just to get rid of him, I said, okay, look, come up and see me one day. And he came up and he had this wonderful scrapbook which is in the exhibit. And he told me all these wonderful stories. And I said, we got to do something on this. And Elliot Kleinberg, as you know, who's our historical writer, he's now retired from the Palm Beach Post, did a wonderful story about the team. And so, and we're here. And how did this come about? Why are we here tonight, Coach, and gathering here? What are we doing here?
Well, Nick, I think just as Rick had the beginning of maybe celebrating the 50th year of the championship of the Roosevelt Maroon Devils, we came from a picture of the team on an easel sitting in the middle of the hall of a county building. And now we're here today in a studio. Didn't everybody know what it was all about? Now the story was hidden for a long time, not necessarily purposely. But what happened in the situation was, when I went down to see if the picture was there after the remodeling was done, I think the wraparound was put around the courthouse that's presently there, I didn't see the picture. I asked about the picture. I said I thought it wouldn't be a hard thing to get the picture because it was one that apparently the state of Florida sent back here, and somehow it was enlarged. And it was the picture that we took as a team picture that you take before you go play in the state tournament. So it was there, and then there was a write-up in the paper about it. And I don't know if Chuck did the write-up or knows anything about it. I'm not sure how that happened, but I know the picture disappeared. Mm-hmm. And I was really hard set to want to find out what really happened to the picture.
So you went on the mission to find that picture.
Right.
And now, and now?
And now we are past that.
Okay.
And headed in the direction of doing some things that are much larger for that. Okay. And I credit that to basically to the fact that over that period of time, I got a little tired of it, you know, and sort of backed off it. I got some people to try to help me before, Dr. E.C. and different people who were in the Sports Hall of Fame here in the county. And I sort of lost touch with it, all the things that happened now in life. So Rick, and I believe you, are the writer of that article that celebrated.
Elliot, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, it woke me up.
Yeah.
And I think you interviewed me on that. And as I read it, I said, oh, that's just like Rick. You know, he's bringing up something that would happen maybe 50 years ago and is going to cause some more trouble for the situation.
Well, that's why we're here to go back and talk about 50 years, what was going on back then, right? Yeah. That's why we're here to celebrate that team. But I'm curious. I want to ask everybody. I mean, I was alive back then. Yes, I was, but I was in elementary school, you know, and I can barely remember like what I was doing. But I'm curious as you look back today and that day, and I'll start with you, Rick. Do you remember in '68? What were you doing in 1967 to '68?
Yeah, I remember very vividly enjoying high school and enjoying that season and the whole 9 yards because it was a good time to be in high school. And with the success we were having and being a senior, it was just one of the things you look forward to. But the thing is, like Coach Andrews is saying, it's about moving forward though. And one of the things that happened was that in high school, coaches tell you, look, in athletics, you're going to learn some things, do some things that can help you in the real world. And a lot of that is tied to if you want to be a very good athlete, you want to be a champion, it's about strategy, it's about teamwork, it's about accountability. And it's kind of ironic how that comes into play because I was working with him as a student then, and now he's coming to me as an adult wanting some help with that. So that's a big part of it.
It goes full circle, it really does.
And the thing too is you played a big role too because if you didn't have the sensitivity and the objectivity in terms of appreciating what we did, we wouldn't be here. And that's a big part of it. And one of the things that's key is being able to share that history.
It's very important. Well, and I think going back then, the person who was helping you was Chuck. Now, you were a sports writer for the Post. Now, at that point, let's be honest here, the Post covered mostly the white schools, didn't do much probably with the black schools. Just talk about that a little bit. What was going on back then?
Yeah, when I first got into the sports department in 1964, I was trying to get around and see as many different sports, as many different schools as I could, and there was kind of an unwritten rule that you covered Palm Beach High and Lake Worth and the white schools, and then like for instance, Sam Marshall was coaching a pretty darn good Roosevelt basketball team. If he wanted to get anything in the paper, he had to call us and report, give us a box score and tell us what happened. And I thought, oh my gosh, I know that's good basketball being played over there. I want to see some of this. I wanted to go down and see Delray Carver. They won 2 straight football state titles, and I said that's what I want to see. And I'd go out and see Roosevelt's football team. They had a player named Marvin Smoke Anderson. Everybody called him Smoke because he was like smoke going through that. They'd open up a hole that wide in the line, and he was through it and past the linebackers. And I thought, well, this is great. I'm really enjoying this. And of course, when basketball starts up, there's Michael Lang and Gregory Lowry and Ricardo Easley and Ron Nicholson, and I'm thinking, boy, this is quite a basketball team. Of course, if you're a sports writer, you're a professional. You're not supposed to be a cheerleader for a team. You're supposed to, play it straight up the middle. If they were playing Kennedy and playing Cecil Relford or somebody, I had to pay just as much attention to that team as that. But it was impossible to cover Roosevelt for any period of time, and even a lot of the opposing coaches would tell me the same thing. They would go into a game, they'd try and come up with the best game plan they could. Well, if we could stop Lowry, maybe Easley won't be hot that night. Maybe if we can box out Lang, he won't go up there and go above the backboard. And so
you had to cover this thing. They were too good, right? You had to cover
it. You watch them for a while, and you're trying to stay straight down the middle. They score about 35 points in a quarter, and the next thing you know, it's 56-18 or something, and you say, "Oh my God, how did that happen?" They would run that full court press. They'd steal the ball. They'd get an easy layup. Next thing you know, it's just no contest anymore. So it was a lot of pleasure to cover that team and get to see them succeed.
Now, Calvin, you graduated a few years earlier, but you played
Yes.
basketball obviously at the school.
Right,
Were you
right.
guys? Were they always? Was Roosevelt always that good, or?
We were always that good.
Okay, no, I knew that, but you tell me, how good were you?
That good.
How good were you?
We were so good when we went down there, they feared us. Northwestern, Dillard, Booker T, Milton, Blake. But we had some tremendous players during that era. We had like Laverne Todd, Red Allen, Willis E. Collier, some great athletes, and we could put that full court press on you too. And Coach Marshall, he was a tremendous coach. And the thing that Coach Floyd and them did, it was tremendous. I mean, 27-0, that's a heck of a record. We never did that, but we went to tournaments. And we won a lot of tournaments and things. And guys back in the day, people now say, guys have chips on their shoulders. But I played with guys had chips when they woke up in the morning on their shoulders. Red Allen, Laverne Todd, Willis C., they came to school with chips on their shoulders. But they were tremendous athletes. And I remember asking Coach Marshall one time, I said, Coach, why didn't we have All-Americans? He said, well, Tick Baby, Coach talked, Tick Baby, he said, if we'd had All-Americans, they wouldn't have space on there for nobody else. Okay, Coach, because we didn't. We never had All-Americans and things like that. And like Nick was saying, I'm pretty sure he covered the schools like Forest Hill and all those guys. And one year, '64, we got together with Lake Worth and some schools and Roosevelt players, and we played together in a summer league. And I remember the guy, Fox, Lenny Fox. I remember him. He was a tremendous point guard, a great point guard, and I enjoyed playing with him. And at the time, the coach of Lake Worth High, he asked me, he says, Calvin, if you came to Lake Worth, we could win the state and the nationals. And I said, well, Coach, I would have to check with my mother. And I had never gone to Lake Worth High. Lake Worth High, I mean, Lake Worth, period, had a reputation for being Lake Worth. And I said I had to check with my mother. And Coach Marshall heard about it. I don't know how Coach heard it, but he came to my house. My mother adored Coach Marshall. And Coach came in and he said, Miss Patterson, I got a problem. She said, what's wrong, Coach? He said, I'm going to lose Tick. She said, losing to what? He's going to Lake Worth High. And my mother hit the ceiling. And Coach said, Tick, You know I got you, baby. I said, I know, Coach. I know.
So you didn't go anywhere, right? You stayed right there.
I had to stay there.
And
You know, I
there
was
you
a
go.
senior anyway. But we always had tremendous players, and we had players that would help you become better. And Coach Brooks, he coached the C team or whatever it was, C team or D team, I don't know exactly. He almost made me quit basketball because I had never played. I was tall and goofy, probably old and goofy now, but he had to take a layup. I couldn't take a layup. He'd punch you on your arm. Come here, Patterson. Boom, boom.
Don't do that today.
Yeah, yeah. And come Tuesday, he was saying I couldn't take a layup.
Yeah.
Patterson, but he wasn't hurting me. You know, he just hit me. And I said, I'm through. I don't want to do this no more.
I think what Calvin's saying points out what that 68 team actually accomplished.
Right.
Yeah.
To go unbeaten. Because you talk about players like Laverne Tart and Red Allen and Willie Collier, and they never went unbeaten.
No.
You look at every sport and you see how many teams go unbeaten.
Right.
Look over the history of the National Football League and see whoever went 17-0. One team. And
well, that's why we get to this team. And the season before, you guys were 19-3, I believe, which was pretty good. You know, okay, so you go into, now you're a senior, you go into the 67, 68 season. Expectations, I'm assuming, were pretty high. You guys thought you'd be good. Just coach. What going that year? I know how coaches talk. Don't give me the coach speak. Give me what were you really thinking going to that season?
Well, really, we were completing the last year of the FIAA, that is the Black Association of Athletics, the Florida Interscholastic Athletic Association, and we knew that we were going to be moving into the Florida High School Activities Association, and we had played in that tournament, which was going to be the last one, and we played it down in Fort Lauderdale. We lost to Dillard and went into the consolation bracket, and then we played Howard from Ocala for consolation. Well, you know, we were not satisfied with that. You know, we were going over, we forgot that, and then we went into the season. And we started our season, we had a purpose, and everybody pretty much had it on their minds because I could see it in their face. Every practice was serious and very meaningful. And we were practicing with such precision that there would be people coming in off the streets to watch our teams practice. You know, and I don't think the players even paid that much attention to them, you know, but I did. So we were getting ready to maybe have a real good season, which we would do anyway, because basically my philosophy was pretty much to try to win every game that you play. Not to, you know, assume that you're going to be undefeated, but to get ready to be able to take advantage of the situation if it came. And that's where I found this team being very competitive.
You had a lot of veterans coming back, but I think you moved this guy to point guard that year, and just
why?
What was all that about?
Well, I pretty much never had a team that didn't have a point guard, and we had lost our point guard, I believe, from during the year before your junior year. So I went to Rick, and well, Rick could shoot as well as Greg, really, you know, and I guess if you put them both in a game, and they would probably be almost like twins scoring. Rick didn't shoot quite as far out as Greg did, but he was very, very precise, and his average would have probably been better. So Rick took the challenge.
I mean, it's got to be tough though, because everybody's a shooter. I mean, come on, you're a shooter, I'm a shooter, we're all shooters, right? So how hard is it to go from you're a shooter, and now you got to be the quarterback, and you got to dish the ball and let somebody else let me shoot, let me score, How was that?
I would say part of that is about what coaches tell you when you want to be good or a champion. It's about teamwork. It's about strategy. It's about accountability. And for me, that was the whole thing, because I didn't think I was really a point guard, because point guards, we were growing up with fancy dribblers. And the thing was, I I was put there, and in the first game, Lincoln Park scored 27 points, and say, okay, we're going down to Carver, and that's Del Rey, and when we play Carver Del Rey, and I'm double teamed bringing the ball up, and that happened for the first half, and I'm thinking they've scouted us because I scored 27, so they're not gonna let me do it this time. They do it third quarter too, but the team spirit comes in. Gray could shoot, James Smith, Dead Cow could shoot, so I'm feeding the ball to them so that we can still win, and it's not about me scoring another 27, it's about us winning. So that was the key as part of this whole thing in terms of going forward. But one of the things I do want to piggyback on in terms of when we talked initially, we talked about the article, but I was very concerned about it not just being about sports, but about the history. I mean, what was happening during that period, the impact and the whole 9 yards. And Elliot did a great job going back in terms of what happened at Industrial High, what the community was like. I mean, things I didn't know about. So that's key in terms of what sports can do from a historical standpoint. And that's what it should be looked at as a tool. And that's where we are now, because one of the things that prompted Coach was he wanted that picture because there were about 6 students who went to college. And a lot of times athletes were considered dumb jocks. So for him, that was an important thing going forward. And we're using sports as a tool for that. And one of the last things I'll wrap up with that is you have some people who will say, well, we don't need white people to tell our history, we can tell our own history. Well, look at this panel. Look at the Historical Society. Help bring this story out, and we couldn't bring it out before. There was no one I could go to for that article other than you. There wasn't a black press, there wasn't a black museum. So it's a situation where we work together and we can do things like this. So we have to tie that athletic part to our history and moving forward.
Yeah, but I always feel like athletics can do that because people focus on, they can follow a team and focus on the team, and you guys weren't just a team. Not only were you winning, you were dominating. You were scoring close to 100 points, and in an era when there's no 3-point shot. I mean, I think about that. You covered those games. How in the world? How were they doing that, Chuck? I'm gonna ask Chuck. He's a sports writer. How were they scoring 100 points a game?
Well, it was like I said. Defensively, they were stealing the ball and getting easy layups. Offensively, they had so many different options. If they got the ball to Michael Lang, he was only like 5'11" and built like a truck, but he could soar so high and dunk the basketball. So they had to concentrate on him. And of course, Lowry, he's scoring maybe 51 points against this team and 47 against this one. And Rick could do it all. I mean, he could drive all the way to the basket, or he could stop at the foul line and hit the jumper. And the big Nicholson in there to get rebounds and play defense, blocking shots. And James Smith, the sophomore, that blended right in with these 4 seniors. It was really impressive. Like I say, you go to a game and you say, okay, I'm going to be impartial. I'm going to watch Roosevelt play Lakeshore or Carver or Kennedy, whoever they're playing. And by the middle of the second quarter, when they've got a 35-point lead, you're saying, my gosh, that team is fantastic. You could tell they were well coached. You could tell they were savvy players. They weren't just out there going through the motions. They knew the game. They knew how to play the game, and it showed.
Were you around that year? I mean,
No,
were you out of town?
I never got an opportunity to see them play, but when I would come home, people would tell me about the team.
Yeah.
And what I found extraordinary from Coach, when we were talking one time and he said, Rick didn't want to be the point guard. He said he didn't like being a point guard. He said, but I knew I had to use him as a point guard. And when I got to know Rick, I understood why Coach put him at the point guard, because he's a very savvy point guard, very smart point guard. Like you say, he wasn't flashy, but he got the job done. And like you say, that's an extraordinary feat. I don't care if you're playing the Little Sisters of Mary to go 27-0.
And
I'll
that's
tell you
go ahead,
a
go
little
ahead.
bit, just right quick, about what my philosophy was
Okay.
on that. You don't have a whole lot of time to build into your basketball players over that period of time. It's short. I put most of the time in doing defense. And I had to pick a point guard that can take care of part of the offense for me, and Rick was the coach on the floor. I mean, he listened, he was smart, he was unselfish, and he didn't care about who got the credit for anything. Nobody could make him think any other way. I wanted to think of it that I was the guy that was doing to him, but that's was his makeup. That was in his DNA.
You know, it's something I'll share with you because we were talking about the historical part of it, and I was talking with one of Calvin's teammates, James Marion, and another alumni, and you always have this debate about who's the best team and all that. And for me, it's always about the facts. And for us, those guys were great. I mean, the Tots, the Bubbas, I mean, James Marion and all those guys. But it came down to, okay, they lost 2 games, we didn't. What you have to look at is they may have been the better athletes, but we had the better team. And that's the key, not just the athletes. And that's what we looked at. But from a historical standpoint, that's what you have to focus on, because like I said earlier, coaches teach you about you can use some of this in the real world. And that's what we did. Because if you had not done your part, he wouldn't have come to me. And from that, I ended up going to Virginia Baker, who was very instrumental in helping us move forward. And she brought in Jeremy Johnson from the Historical Society, and they got the ball rolling here. And Coach told me he was talking to Chuck Otterson at some point. I said, gee, he should be part of this too. Let's get him in here. And all of that is because we can bring this history around. And the thing is, it's about the teamwork part. And we were going to be inclusive. We wanted to reach out to Mrs. Hutnell's family because she had a lot of artifacts and materials, and we wanted to honor her for that. But we also reached out to ARLIC, reached out to the Alumni Association, because we want to be inclusive. And one of the things that's key to that is keeping that history alive. And if we could go to those folks and do it, then that's where we would go in addition to here, but we didn't have that. So it's about bringing all of us together to keep this history alive.
Well, and it's a special season. You had all those things happen, but
Yeah.
as you're living through this and you're playing a couple games a week, whatever you're doing back in
Yeah.
the sky, I mean, and you're winning. When does it suddenly hit you during the season, whatever, early, mid-season? This is a special year. We can win. We can win this thing. We are going to do this. There's a certain moment. Was there a certain game, a certain play? I mean, I'll start either of you two.
You want to go?
Well, I didn't think about it. About whether we were going to win the state championship or whether we were going to be undefeated. I just went in the gym, felt that we had to practice to try to be the best team that we could be. And I thought then that we could win, if we could practice that way, we'd be prepared to win every game. Because I thought maybe you could win every game that you played. And I really thought that.
Okay, I would say, to be honest, I thought there would never be a team as good as that team with Todd and those folks losing 2 games. See the pictures on the wall. Never thought that would happen, because for me, not only do you have to be good, you have to be lucky too, because you can have an injured player, you can just have an off night, anything could happen. So for me, never thought it would be undefeated. But I would say during the middle of the season, it was one of those things where we had this tremendous comeback at Mays, and that was a key component of that. But you expect something's going to happen where you're going to lose 1 game. And
No, talk about that Mays game. Talk about that. So that was one of my next questions.
Well,
so.
it goes back to being prepared, and as Chuck mentioned, it's about defense. We didn't just average 90 points on offense and 70 on defense. It was about being prepared. And it was a situation where they were very good coming out, and you wonder how they lost 5 or 6 games. But part of that is still about timing and preparation. He had us doing a new pressing defense. Okay, we're down about 19, 20 points at the half. You're thinking this may be one of those nights you get that 1 loss because you got to lose sometime. And it didn't happen. And for me, one of the things that happened was a thing where more credibility for coach was, you're down by 19, you only have 16 minutes to make up that kind of deficit. Okay, they're playing that well. He came in, Is there anybody in this room who thinks we can't win? We're not dumb enough to say, I don't. We're going to do this new defense we practice, and by the end of the third quarter, we're going to be down by 10. Okay? End of the fourth quarter, we're going to be close enough. It happened. And part of that, in terms of the coaching part, when we were turning the ball over in third quarter, Greg would come down and want to shoot jumpers at the key, and I had to pull him to the side and say, look, drive to the hoop. We may get 3 points instead of 2. Mm-hmm. So that was part of what went into that, and we end up winning by 1 point.
I would say it was the final. You won by 1 point, so
yeah.
It did come back. Yeah, that was the closest I assumed to losing a game that season. That was your.
Well, it was overtime and in the state too.
Okay. We'll get this. Not in the state yet. We'll get there. Okay.
Yeah,
Meantime, I'll do all you, Chuck. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think one of the things that made this team so good was the fact that Ricardo was not what you expect in a point guard.
In what way?
I can remember a good example. Kennedy had a player, little guy. He had a brother that played that was more famous than he was, but this guy was one of these. He threw these no-look behind-the-back passes and things like that. He came down, and he was an excellent point guard. Sometimes he'd fake his own teams out. Well, the other team knew he wasn't going to shoot. He wasn't going to score any points against them, so they could concentrate on the other players. And if maybe he throws one of these no-look passes that his teammates not expected, and they'll step in front and go get it. Well, they knew with Rick, he could shoot that ball as well as anybody on either team. So he's going to come down. If one of his teammates is open, they gotta concentrate on them. But they've also got to remember that he can go all the way, take it in for a layup, or he can hit the jump shot. So I think maybe he didn't get as much credit as he should have, because everybody said, "Oh, those teams, they're so good. They don't need a coach. They don't need a point guard. They just need to go out on the court and win the game." And I think a lot of people didn't realize how big a factor Rick was.
But before your head gets too big, let's go. So you go through the regular season, and now I want to get to the playoffs, okay? Because that's the money games, So just going into the playoffs. Were you the team to beat? Were people pointing at you? We got to knock these guys off. Were you the favorites, or just talk about that and the pressure, if you were, that kind of pressure that was on you?
To be honest with you, I wasn't thinking like that. I don't know if the team was thinking like that, because we just looked at it as the next game. And one of the nice things about the team was we knew our roles, and we just accepted the roles, so there wasn't a lot of drama, and we worked well together. Because just like Chuck mentioned, and he even gave us the nickname the Twin Bombers, Greg and I, because we could shoot jump shots from a distance. But we also knew that James Smith could play defense. He could score in double figures. We knew Michael Lang, Poco, that Chuck talked about, could get rebounds and score in double figures. But we knew Nick was going to play defense, block shots, get the rebounds. So those were the things that helped us move forward with that. And that was key. And just like the real world in terms of life, to be successful on projects, people have to play roles, and we win together.
Now, the second part of the playoffs I want to talk about is this is the first year when you're going to play integrated teams,
yep.
white players. Now, Kyle, you never played against a white player in high school at all, right?
No.
I'm thinking unless it was exhibition or something like that, right?
Exhibition,
but truthfully, in the game that counted, you never did.
No, we never played in the schools, and but the competition that we played against in the all-black schools, it was great. It was great. And the thing about the team would coach them were they were saying that, sometimes people will have an opinion about things. If you go 27-0, they say, well, they didn't play the same schools we played. Yes, they did. They played the same school. And I found that out by doing this thing, sitting down with Coach and Rick. They played white schools, but they always played them in tournaments. And we didn't. But we knew we were good, and we knew if we went up against them.
Yeah. Would you hope you would gotten the chance to play some
Yeah,
of those things back
yeah.
back in the day when you were playing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, the only time we did it was like in a summer league.
Yeah.
And when you play against these guys, you realize how much better than you are. And these guys, some of these guys are all Americans, and we didn't have any. But I wouldn't change a thing because we enjoyed playing for Coach Marshall. And just like Ricky and them, we could score 80 or 90 points a game. We put that full court press on them. And we had a point guard named Charlie Morris. And you talking about a guy could handle the ball. He could handle that ball. But he was flashy. Rick was consistent, you know, but Charlie was flashy. But I never got a chance to do it. But playing in a little summer league, I realized that we were just as good. In some cases, we were even better than the guy who was an All-American.
So going in, you have no idea how good. I mean, you haven't even, when the white teams couldn't scout people back then. I mean, you wouldn't even see them playing during the season, right? So you had no idea how good they really were, I would imagine.
Well, somebody wrote an article at the end of the season when we were going in to play post. And the article said that Roosevelt has been a really powerful team, but they haven't played a team like Belgrade. And I hadn't heard anything about Belgrade. I knew where Belgrade was, and I knew what Lake Shore was. I know Lake Shore had a good team. But I didn't know very much about Belgrade's team. The Belgrade team was an all-white team. And I took the article. I don't think Rick remembers this because he probably didn't pay attention.
Is this a Chuck article? Was this in the Post?
I don't think it was Chuck.
No,
I
it's-
want to clarify. Where was this article? Where was this article?
Hey, I took the article and put the article on a bulletin board outside our locker room.
Okay.
And when I came into the gym, Greg was turning over laughing over everything. So I probably said, well, Greg would get too overconfident. But I had Rick. Rick was going to keep Greg straight. I wasn't worried about that. I just wanted them to be motivated to do what they were supposed to do.
So did that fire you up, that article?
I would say yes, to make a long story short, but it was about doing what we could do and what we knew we could do.
So you didn't worry about the other teams. You just got to play your game, and things will take care of themselves.
Yeah,
basically.
because it goes back to what Chuck was saying. You couldn't double team both of us. You had to let one of us go. And so it was just one of those things. You pick your own poison, and then you had James Smith, dead cow. So it was just one of those things that we had the benefit to a large extent.
So today, when we go in the postseason, we kind of look at these: who's playing, who's going to win. We make predictions. Back then, I'm assuming you didn't do that, or did you do that, Chuck? I was wondering.
Well, I remember specifically when Roosevelt was going over to Arcadia to play in DeSoto High School. I believe Arcadia DeSoto was also unbeaten going into the regional tournament.
Okay.
So, of course, everybody in Arcadia thought, well, this team from West Palm Beach, they're not going to beat our boys, you know. So I think Roosevelt won by like 15 points. And it was just an indication of it's a good level of competition. And maybe they hadn't been playing quite the level of competition of Roosevelt playing Dillard and Mays and Blanche Ely and some of those schools, and there was no question about the quality. Joe Saravola, who's as good a basketball coach as you would find anywhere, won state championships in high school, college, pro, and anyway, his two best players, Pete Broberg and Daryl Saravola, would go over to Roosevelt to play during the summer with that competition over there, so they'd get better. And I was a little bit amazed when Roosevelt got to the state tournament after winning big against Arcadia DeSoto, that they had to go into overtime that first game. And the first time I was surprised was on the very opening tip. Roosevelt gets the tip. Rick throws the ball over to Greg Lowry. And Lowry is virtually unguarded. Hits a jump shot. And I'm thinking, don't these guys, don't they scout? I mean, don't they know? But it was one of those back and forth games. I don't know how many times the lead changed hands. It must have been 15, 20, 25 times. It was amazing.
So that was your toughest game then, you would think, in obviously in the playoffs too.
Yeah, it was a close game. You're going to have close games, but that's the difference when you have, options that you're running off offenses too, and making the adjustments. Because that's key when you transfer that into real life as well. So yeah, that was a biggie. But also had close games with Lakeshore because people thought we were just a run and gun, but not realizing, like Chuck mentioned, we played defense as well. And when Lakeshore slowed it down, we still won. So it didn't make a difference whether you tried to run with us or slow it down. We still
You
came
play
out
both
with the
styles.
V.
You can do that, yeah. So now let's get to the championship game, and then basically, it's all here. You're undefeated, so you guys got to be feeling that a little bit. But just do you remember your thoughts before that game? What you were thinking about? Did you remember your speech to the team? I'm just curious.
I didn't pay any attention to the fact that we were going to play. You mean the final game?
Yeah, championship.
Well, it was not very dramatic about it because we had played the team before, Lake City, and that team was really tough. They were a good team. They were well balanced. They had a great leader, and we just legitimately were really nice. That's the part we were lucky to get out of there, but we were prepared to get out of there, and that's the only reason we did get out, because we actually were prepared for everything and anything that we were going to run into, so we got out of there. But when we played the next team for the championship, I mean, we were not, the most exciting thing about playing the championship game was that all the coaches from Palm Beach County were lined up down the sideline pulling for us. Black coaches, white coaches, everybody together on both sides of the court, pulling for us. And we just had that kind of support, but as far as the team was concerned, that's the way I felt, Rick.
But I would say too that one of the interesting things about that season was no one on the team talked about being undefeated. And that's why I was saying earlier, we took it one game at a time, and there was never that conversation. So it didn't matter what the record was or who we were playing, it was about the next team that we played.
So you play that game and you win your state champions. You remember how you felt the moment? Now you are state champion. Now you are undefeated. You've done it. What was going through your mind then?
Well, for me, it's definitely a sense of accomplishment. I mean, folks were, talking about what the season was. Greg talked to the coach about how he felt about him, the father figure or father on the court, that kind of thing. It was very exhilarating feeling with that. And the city, came back and had Appreciation Day, had the parade, had an exhibition game at the auditorium. So it was very well received. And that kind of goes back to me coming in contact with you, because I'm thinking about the history, and 10 years goes by, 25 years, and no one's mentioning the history about this. It's not about the basketball, it's about the history of it. The first team, when we were taught in high school, you're just as good as anyone else, okay? It was proven, but we let the history die, and I had to come to you because there was no other place to go to promote that history.
Were you conscious of that then? You were very young, obviously, in high school. You were actually very conscious of that, the point here of proving yourselves that you are as good as anybody else?
Yeah, because that was taught in Roosevelt School. I mean, you can do whatever anyone else can do. I mean, that was just part of the mantra if you ever went there. And ironically, the first opportunity we got, we showed that examples. So it wasn't anything that was taken for granted on my part. That's why I was kind of surprised the black leadership, let's say at an ARLIC or a alumni association, didn't promote that historical part, not about basketball, but about the culture, what was going on. And because they didn't, I ended up coming to you. We ended up at the Historical Society because we didn't have that option, and we should have had that option. It's not that we don't have the skill set, it's just we don't work that well together as a team to do that. That's as far as some of the leaders anyway, and we have to change that.
Yeah,
It's very interesting. Back in those days, obviously there was a racism involved here. You can't get around that. I mean, sometimes that's very overt, sometimes it's subtle. But I remember in junior high, I was at Coniston Junior High, and Hank Martin was the football coach. And our football team, when I was in the 9th grade, was unbeaten, untied, unscored upon. Beat the All-Stars 40-0 in the final game, the Palm Bowl. Coach Martin took us over to Roosevelt to watch a football game so the players could benefit from, maybe the best football in Palm Beach County wasn't being played at Palm Beach High or Lake Worth or Riviera Beach High. We want to take you over to see these players at Roosevelt and see. So this was something that, like I said, you got the obvious racism. Some people, they're not going to go to school with black kids, and so forth and so on. But behind the scenes, you've got people that want their kids to get better in every respect, to treat other people as individuals for what they accomplish, not the color of their skin. And I think that's something some people forget. They say, "Oh boy, everything was it was all segregated until 1970 or something like that." But there was indications that there were people working toward that goal.
I'm curious. You were obviously not part of that team, but you were conscious they won a state championship.
Yeah,
Was there pride on your part as a former student there?
I mean, I really was. Like I said, I didn't know that much about the team, and I didn't know, and I always knew Coach. I didn't know Coach because he was ahead of me, a lot ahead of me. But they played. I remind him that he probably tired of me saying this. They played Bethune-Cookman, and I had never seen anybody shoot like Coach. I had never seen anybody. He could just shoot, and he was making bucket after bucket. And the team, that 27-0, and like what we're doing here, and I'm so glad you're doing this, and I'm glad I got to be around Coach and Easley because I didn't know him. Easley was a young guy, but for some reason or other he remembered me from high school, and that's how we got to be friends. He told me, Tick, he said, I remember you. And they stayed in the project, the Dunbar Project. Boy, the projects were great back then. But anyway, and he said, I used to see you. He said, you always dress nice, you know. And I'm looking at this guy going, how old are you, man? You had to be somewhere, a young kid. And we kind of connected there. And I tell people, I said, I don't care. Some guys, they, like I was saying earlier, they were saying, well, they didn't play the same. No. They played white schools. They played black schools. And I said, they were just good. That's the bottom line. And I'm so glad I got an opportunity to talk to Coach and Ricky because I didn't know. And I didn't know how many games Coach had won. Coach won a tremendous amount of games, about 500-something games, I think. And I didn't know that.
400 plus.
400 plus.
Yeah, that's right. He is truly a legend. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, winning that championship, what did that mean personally to you?
That championship was my first one, so I really didn't know what to think about it. Really, I was so tired mentally until I asked Bradley, who was the athletic director, to take care of the team, and I went in and went to sleep. I was really
You're
tired.
exhausted.
That's
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know what had happened to me really during the entire season, but I think everything came down at that point. But I just want to say too, before we get out of here, I want to tell you just how important it might have been, because when I walked in and I saw that display that we have in the museum, the only thing I could think about was Miss Hutnell's collection.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't really think about what was going on with that team because I knew what she had done, not only for the black community in terms of its history, but for the entire county of Palm Beach. I knew that. And I knew also at that point, and it really made me feel very sad, that it's here and it's there and it has not been really done. It's just. And I pretty much knew why, but I didn't want to cast any aspersions on anybody. But the thing is, I knew that it couldn't have been the Historic Society of Palm Beach County, because they did their job. They accepted us. They did the work that was supposed to have been done. After Mrs. The commissioner,
Virginia
Baker, heard our story, and gave us a contact to the CEO, Jeremy, and then we met with Lisa, and we got the ball rolling. It's been rolling very smooth ever since, and some very special things happen. And I still expect for a lot of good things to continue.
And I'll say, like he was saying, Miss Huttonell was an extraordinary. She has so much stuff in history during that time. Her son, Earl, I want to thank him personally because he allowed us to use his mother's stuff. And he has a tremendous amount of stuff that his mother has. And sometimes you want to ask him, say, Earl, can we get a little more? But Earl, I said, so if anything goes bad with it, Earl, we can always blame Coach Floyd.
Well, you got to protect that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I would say one funny story was your scrapbook. Rick's scrapbook is part of the exhibit. I've seen the exhibit. It's wonderful. Please come down and see it. It's unbelievable. But Rick's scrapbook, I mean, he didn't want to give it to me. I've seen the scrapbook. I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, well, to do this story right, we really need to use the scrapbook, get photos out of it, and research and give it to Ellie. And you didn't want to give it to us. I finally, somehow I must have convinced. I must have gave you money or something. I convinced you to give it to me, and I was very persuasive. But anyway, you gave it to me. I remember when I gave it to Ellie, I said, Elliot, you will guard this with your life. You're going to sleep with it under your pillow every night. You're going to guard this, and we got it back. And
that's because you're a rock star.
I'm a rock star. But I remember your mom had to come get you back in Atlanta. Your mom came by, and I got to meet her and talk to her a little bit. And I even told her, I said, this is like the Bible. Don't ever mess with this thing. So, but that is important. You got to protect those things, because most times, like we were talking earlier, people throw things out. They just junk or whatever. They don't think about the history. And you thought about that, and it's all here preserved. So.
Yep, and fortunately, there were bigger plans for that, because now it's at the Historical Society. But the bottom line still is having an opportunity to do that. And when we were trying to do something like this, as I mentioned before, we went to black organizations to do it. And it was easier working with the panel here in the Historical Society than it was working with an ARLIC. It was easier than working with the Alumni Association, and it shouldn't have been like that. Right. Because we're about preserving the history and sharing the history. And if you keep it to yourself, you're devaluing the history.
Well, this leads to one of my questions. I'm really curious. Okay, the world we live in today, all right? Social media, 24/7, internet, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. You guys don't know none of that stuff. Okay, I've got two daughters. They know all this stuff, and I know all this stuff. The thing is, if this happened, something like this would have happened today. Say there was all those things back in 1968. How much would it would have been like? It would have gone viral. I mean, think of what you guys did, what this team did, and I mean, how would it? So I was curious. You kind of sorry maybe it wasn't like that back then. So the word would have gotten out. People would have found out about you guys.
No, because we have so much history that there's never enough of it. But we don't do a good enough job of what we have. And you have, for instance, like with this, all we wanted to do when we went to Earl, Ms. Huttonell's son would say, we just want to see what you have, because we want this to be more than basketball. We want to be about the community, about the people. All we want to do is see what you have. And he said, hey, I can think of 10 things off the top of my head, but I want to bounce it off ARLIC. And we said, fine. But going to ARLIC was very difficult because we couldn't even initially see what they had. I mean, we went to the president of ARLIC. This is Annie Ruth. And we said we just want to see it because this is going to be about the culture. This is going to be about Roosevelt, about the city. And an excuse that she had was, well, tell us what you want. We can't tell you what we want until you let us see what you have. You have 300 plus items there. Well, you can't see it because it's at Earl's house. Well, we can go to Earl's house. Well, it's delicate, it can't be moved. We'll go there. I mean, it's for exhibits. So that's the kind of roadblock you have, and we shouldn't have that. Folks need to be held accountable for hiding the history.
Right. But one thing you said earlier is how like the community and the black community in Roosevelt followed your team. I've seen the pictures in there. It was an incredible school. Okay.
Yeah.
But this team, you kind of won a championship in 1968. 2 years later, the school's shut down.
Yeah.
It's integration. Everybody thinks this is a wonderful thing. You should be integrated. This is all good. But really, did the black community lose something when a Roosevelt shut down?
Of course.
I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you guys. You know,
I'll jump. Of course we did. I mean, for this city, the first black school was Industrial High. Most of us don't know a lot about Industrial High. That's why Elliot's story was instrumental in educating us even more with that. The next predominantly black school in West Palm was Roosevelt High. We let that disappear. And I say we did it because I'm an alumni. But you go to Miami, Northwestern is still there. You have Blanche Ely that's still there. You have Dillard that's still there. You go north to Lincoln Park Academy, it's still there. What did they do that we didn't do? Right. My opinion is you have some folks who are not held accountable, number one, and the projects are what I call they drown in the sea. They drown because of people being selfish, /stubborn, egotistical, or arrogant. Because the people in Miami and Broward County and in Fort Pierce, they're not really smarter than we are. It's just that we let this stuff drown in the sea, and we have to do a better job of that in terms of getting rid of that.
But we've saw, Coach, your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd say just simply, in piggybacking off what Rick said, we just didn't fight for it. We were doing other things, but we didn't fight for Roosevelt. And as much as we had received from Roosevelt over that long period of time, we should have been fired up to fight for it like so. Those people that led us in that time to get where we had gotten didn't really take us over that hump. I guess that's what it was, you know, we didn't have that. And I was a part of that because I played there, I went to school there, was taught by those teachers, and came back and worked with them, and then I ended up coaching there. So, you know, we all got a little bit to pay for that, you know. It was going to be a hard job, but that's okay. Nobody ever ran away from hard jobs.
That's right.
You know, and that's my take.
Cal, what do you think?
I wasn't here, but I think we got fascinated, like you said, with the integration thing. It was good. It was good. But there had some bad parts, too, about it. Because I think when we could go to Palm Beach High, I never went there. But I used to drive by there, and I said, wow, that's a beautiful school. And I think we got fascinated with that. And some of the people, children, were going to Palm Beach High now. My kid can go to Palm Beach High. So why do I need Roosevelt? And so nobody really stood up for it and say, hey, and like with Rick, like he's telling me that time he was a young man that he used to see me. And that was Roosevelt, because we all knew each other and we all cared about each other. But all of a sudden integration comes. It's like children now, young people. Florida State, University of Miami, that's where they go. I was recruiting for my university, Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and kids had no idea about Southern, even Florida A&M. And I'm going, you don't know about, you know, no, because they're going to Florida State and, you know, and University of Miami. And so I understand that. But Roosevelt was a special school. The teachers knew you. They knew your parents. They see you doing something wrong, they'd tell you, don't have me come to your house and tell your mother. You don't want your mother to know nothing, you know. And so that would get you straight. Even the police officers back then, they knew all the guys. I remember officers telling me, say, Tick, you better get home. Don't have me come tell Miss Patterson. I'm gone, you know. And those things, and I truly think that they got enamored with Palm Beach High, and my kid can go to Palm Beach High now. So Roosevelt, we don't need it. And I think that's what happened, and all of a sudden now, it's at a point where people say, we want to get Roosevelt back. That's 130 years ago. Were y'all still working on
Well,
that?
you know, I actually
No.
so most of my career in Tampa, and there was a black high school they called Blake High School.
Blake, I'm from-
oh,
we
oh,
used
you
to-
know, okay,
oh,
you know,
yeah,
oh,
we
you
used
know,
to
okay.
thump- we used to thump Blake.
So now Blake, now they rebuilt. There's now a Blake High School now, but it's a new high school. But I mean,
Yeah.
in honor the memory of that school, they wanted
Right.
to like the same thing. How do we throw this away and
Yeah.
ignore this when it was part of our history? So
Right,
they've done
right,
that. So
right.
there are ways to do it. And I'm curious. I know you were in the news, you're in sports, but I'm curious, like the Post. And all this is going on, they're writing about it. The change in sports, you have to notice. You're going suddenly from the black schools to the white schools, and now they're playing together. And what's going on here?
Oh, it was fascinating because, you know, having covered them when they were segregated, and you see a game, Roosevelt playing Dillard, and you see a couple of white schools play, and you wonder, well, what would it be like if they combined? And I wrote a column one time. If you combined all the high schools and everything, what kind of a team you might have, and so forth. And certainly, there's going to be something lost when you've got history that you just let sort of fade away, and so there's good and bad there. There's no question about it. I mean, I've always felt like I'd just like to see everybody judged as individuals, and if they play at a segregated school, you gotta wonder, well, how good would he be if you're playing at an integrated school? I remember when Herschel Walker was in high school. He went to some small high school, and he was gaining all kinds of yardage and everything. But everybody was saying, well, how would he do playing against a big school that has a lot of big players? So there's always a question there, and until you get it fully integrated, you'll never know the answer. But at the same time, when you fully integrate, then some of the benefits of the history of places like Roosevelt are lost.
Yeah, like I'm curious. The young people today, they even know anything about this history? I'm saying young people. You know, they're not good on history anyway, but they know anything about what you guys went through. You know,
and that's part of what we're talking about. To piggyback on what Coach said, but for us to keep our history alive, part of it's doing what we're doing now, to have some physical evidence of what happened, but also some buildings that people can see and participate in. Because if you don't, you rely on people who are alive, who are not going to be alive forever, who's going to tell the story. You have these kind of things that are happening now with the Historical Society. You have the building itself, so it piques the interest. But the court said, well, we didn't fight enough. From a basketball perspective, we had an offense. If that first play didn't work, you had options. Just like with this, if what we were doing didn't work, we should have gone to other options and changed the strategy like a Dillard and Blanche Ely and all the other schools did, but we didn't. And we can't blame anyone but ourselves now, and it can be changed, but the leadership has to be held accountable. There has to be a different strategy.
Yeah, but I want to say that the district had a wonderful plan and wonderful strategy to make this thing go over smoothly. But what they really did was they took the better teachers at Roosevelt, moved them, and it was so obvious. We could see it. It wasn't hidden. They moved them from Roosevelt, and they put other teachers in who were not as good and didn't have that background with them, so things got weaker, you know, and you find yourself fighting against people that you always respected. So it was the plan that did it, and we sort of bought into that, and it happened. But that was the district. Like, one of the things that I was really interested in, and I was really mad about, because Joe Sorolla was over at Palm Beach High. And one of the things that people wanted to make an argument about was that Joe and I were such enemies. No such thing. Joe and I were friends. We respected each other, and we didn't go out and socialize, but we had a respect for each other in the field of coaching basketball and so forth. And I didn't have anything against him getting the players that I had from Roosevelt, because it wasn't his fault. The district had all the plans to do that. I didn't like the way they did it, you know, because they offered me things that I didn't want, and I turned it down. And there was a kind of a way that they wanted to sort of punish me about it because I did that. But it turned out okay because it didn't punish me. I went over to North Shore, and North Shore was 2-22 when I went over there. And the first year that I went over there, we ended up with Chuck probably can tell us better than I can, but I think we ended up with maybe 19-3 or something like that. And had a wonderful year in 71. And from there we kicked off some things that probably happened that hadn't happened, like Tick was talking about, Calvin was talking about, that we didn't have people coming down, that is coaches from the major colleges and D1, Division I schools. But we had them coming down to see us at that time. They came to West Palm Beach. They came to my house. They came to the players' houses. They were all around in this area. I think everybody probably came down here except Bobby Knight, you know, but they were all here, you know. Coach Smith spent a lot of time here. They invited me to come to that place. Had an opportunity to get players to go in the areas of Parade All-Americans, McDonald All-Americans. So I got a chance to meet a lot of people, and one of the great persons that I met was Coach Wooden. And you can imagine how delighted I was to sit down and have breakfast with him, and not one day, but 2 days. You know.
No, I was lucky to hear him give a speech at the Final Four one year at a breakfast. Unbelievable. I mean, you wonder, how did this guy win? You just listen to the speech, you know how he won. You know?
It's real.
That's good. That's what, I wonder if sport. I'm not oversimplifying here or anything, but I'm wondering, you know, basically, is sports the great equalizer? I mean, is it with blacks and whites and get together, work together, and play together? I mean, you know, has that always been the case now? Or I mean, now we're good. I mean, I know you gave something up at losing during the integration, but now, I'm just curious.
I'm not sure about the great equalizer, but it's a great tool because it brings folks together, and it's up to you what you do after that. You know, because if you're not selfish and egotistical and arrogant, you can work together with people and you get more done. But if you don't, you lose out. And the bottom line is, we, black folks, leaders, haven't worked that well together. Because if you just look at an offset of Rosemary Avenue and Tamarind, when I was growing up, those were black meccas in terms of businesses. Now they're pretty much wiped out on Rosemary or dilapidated on Tamarind, and we accepted that. We let it happen, and we don't have to, but we have to change the strategy. So sports can be that tool.
We got to start wrapping up. I want to go around real quick. Each of you, give me one. When you look back and think about that year, '68, just what's the one thing you just one or two words? What do you think about?
Historical.
Historical. Okay, Coach, what do you think?
Commitment and attendance at games. The game with Arcadia gave me that. It looked like the city was in Arcadia, following us.
That's good. A lot of interest there. Chuck?
Well, you know, all of this talk about the things that were tried and worked and didn't work and so forth, like Floyd said, he didn't like the way they were offering him jobs he wasn't interested in. They had the same situation. It was, people were wondering, would it be Saravola or Andrews coaching at Twin Lakes when they combined Palm Beach and Roosevelt? Well, the football situation, Lynn Brown had been a pretty good coach there at Palm Beach High, but Roger Coffey down at Carver had won 2 state titles. They needed to do something with him, so they offered Lynn Brown a job as in charge of transportation. I asked him, I said, did you want that? He said, no, I wanted to coach football. But that's the way it happened. But some of these things, it reminds me of a situation you see sometimes when a football coach tries to take players and fit his system instead of him adjusting to their strengths. And I think Roosevelt was a fine example of the coach teaching these players how to play the game and taking advantage of their strengths and being very successful at it.
Tick, I'm going to call you Tick.
Yeah,
Tick.
there you be.
One last word. Let's go.
The excitement, the gyms being full, and playing with some great players like Bowman and Charlie and those guys, and guys like Easley remembering me, and he was so young. And even today, some people will come up and remind me, Tick, I remember you when I was a little boy. And I said, well, that makes me an old man. So I don't want you to remember too much.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. This has been wonderful, educational. I mean, I've learned things, and it's a fascinating era. What you did was very impressive. Okay, one last word, Rick. Go ahead.
Can I do some thank yous?
Oh, of course.
Okay, well, for thank yous would be definitely with Calvin Tick, because this is not his forte, and he's helped as a volunteer doing a lot of different things. I know it's out of water for you, the stuff you did, but you can see the results. Yeah. Chuck, amazing in terms of your objectivity, what you brought to the table. Definitely appreciate it, because it adds to what we have here. You, with the article, I mean, if you didn't do that, we probably wouldn't be here doing this now. And what Elliot did, Kleinberg, big time, shout outs to him, and Coach naturally. But also in terms of what we have here, Earl Hutnell and his family, because we could have done it, but it wouldn't have been the thing to do without including Mrs. Hutnell. I mean, she worked very hard for that, and kudos to Earl for coming on board when Arlick was such a hard organization to work with. But also Jeremy, because Virginia talked to us. She played a part, but she brought Jeremy into this. And if Jeremy didn't do this, we wouldn't be here. But he also had Lisa Steinberg, who has done an amazing job.
Oh,
and
Lord,
you could see that she had the passion for it. So those are the folks you think, but also the sponsors who did this.
Right.
Because the sponsors helped put this together. And the unfortunate thing, and this is about accountability, none of the sponsors are from a black organization. That's sad. We need to do better than that.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. This has been a wonderful program. And do yourself a favor. Go to the old courthouse in downtown West Palm Beach and look at this exhibit. It's fascinating. You'll learn things, and you'll be amazed. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this virtual presentation. I would now like to invite you to come join us at the Richard and Pat Johnson Palm Beach County History Museum to view this inspiring exhibition live, which will be on display in our historic courtroom through February 26. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the museum.